54 years ago, a 4-year-old girl vanished without a trace from her front yard in Springfield, Illinois, leaving her family shattered and an entire community paralyzed with fear. Authorities suspected William Turner, a family friend who worked at the local hardware store, the same man who mysteriously left town just days after the disappearance. But with no body recovered and far too little evidence to pursue, the investigation eventually collapsed. Yet through all those years, her mother never surrendered hope, clinging to the fragile belief that her daughter was still alive somewhere. Then one day, when a determined young detective reopened the dusty case file, she discovered one critical photograph that everyone had overlooked. A photograph that would turn the entire case upside down and shock the nation in a way no one saw coming. Before we dive into this extraordinary story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you appreciate this kind of in-depth investigation, don't forget to hit subscribe. If you want to see more solved cold cases like this one, make sure you hit that like button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss our new uploads. These stories of justice and closure need to be told, and your support helps us bring them to light. Now, let's go back to 1962 and uncover what really happened to little Sarah Jones. In 1962, Springfield, Illinois moved to the steady rhythm of Kennedy-era America. Neat rows of single-story homes lined the tree-shaded streets, where neighbors still exchanged morning pleasantries over picket fences, and children played freely under the watchful eyes of a tight-knit community. On the eastern edge of town, the Jones family lived in a modest beige house with green shutters and a well-tended garden. Robert Jones, a former Navy man, worked double shifts at the Sangamon Steel Factory. He left before sunrise, lunch pail in hand, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel driveway. His wife Eleanor kept an immaculate home and volunteered at the local church. She was a quiet, devoted woman who kept photo albums meticulously organized and saved every drawing her daughter made. Between them was their only child, 4-year-old Sarah Jones, with golden curls and bright blue eyes that crinkled when she laughed. She carried a worn teddy bear named Charlie everywhere, sang nursery rhymes in a sweet, clear voice, and had recently learned to write her own name in wobbly letters. Her father called her Sunshine, and neighbors often heard her giggling as she followed her mother around the garden, small watering can clutched in both hands. That summer morning, July 17, 1962, dawned bright and cloudless over Springfield. The radio played Peppermint Twist, while the scent of fresh coffee and toast filled the Jones kitchen. Eleanor prepared breakfast, Robert read the morning newspaper, and Sarah sat swinging her legs, feeding bits of scrambled egg to Charlie the bear when she thought no one was looking. After breakfast, Robert kissed his daughter's forehead, tousled her curls, and headed to work. Eleanor helped Sarah into her favorite yellow sundress and red sandals. The child begged to play in the front yard with her new set of plastic farm animals while her mother hung laundry on the clothesline that stretched across the backyard. Eleanor agreed, setting up a blanket under the shade of the maple tree where Sarah could be seen clearly from the kitchen window. For 20 minutes, Eleanor moved between hanging sheets and checking on Sarah through the window. The little girl arranged her toy animals in a circle, talking to them in her high, clear voice. Mrs. Dorothy Miller from across the street waved as she collected her mail. A blue sedan drove slowly past the house, but no one paid it any particular attention. Cars often slowed when passing children at play. At precisely 10:47 a.m., Eleanor carried an empty laundry basket inside to retrieve the last load from the washing machine. She was gone exactly 3 minutes. When she returned to the front yard, the blanket lay empty. The plastic farm animals were scattered across the grass. Charlie the bear was abandoned face down by the sidewalk. Sarah was gone. Eleanor called her daughter's name, calmly at first, then with rising panic. She ran to the sidewalk, looking up and down the quiet street. No sign of a small girl in a yellow dress. She checked behind bushes, under the porch steps, inside the garage, nothing. The minutes ticked by, each one stretching into eternity as a mother's worst nightmare began to unfold in broad daylight on an ordinary summer morning in Springfield, Illinois. With trembling hands, Eleanor rushed to the phone and dialed the operator. "My little girl is missing," she gasped, barely able to form the words that would forever divide her life into before and after. "Please send someone. Please find my Sarah." The call from the Jones residence reached the Springfield Police Department at 11:23 a.m. Chief Detective Frank Williams was reviewing case notes when the radio dispatcher announced a missing child at 742 Elmwood Drive. Williams immediately dispatched 3 patrol cars and headed to the scene himself. By then, Robert Jones had been called home from work. He stood in the driveway, face ashen, fists clenched at his sides as police cars converged on their quiet street. Chief Williams interviewed the parents separately, standard procedure in child disappearance cases. Eleanor, fighting to maintain composure, described the yellow sundress, the red sandals, the teddy bear left behind. Robert, voice breaking, showed officers the recent photograph of Sarah on her 4th birthday, golden curls framing a face full of innocent joy. Officer James Bentley led the initial scene examination. The front yard was cordoned off with yellow police tape. In the soft soil near the sidewalk, officers discovered a line of small footprints, Sarah-sized, leading toward the street, where they abruptly ended. Beside them, a partial larger footprint suggested an adult had stood there. No drag marks, no signs of a struggle, just a child's abandoned toys and the haunting stillness of an empty blanket. Mrs. Miller from across the street approached the officers, wringing her hands in her apron. She had seen the blue sedan pass by, an older model, she thought, maybe a Chevrolet, and noticed it slowed near the Jones house. She couldn't see the driver clearly but remembered something odd. The car had out-of-state plates, though she couldn't recall which state. She thought nothing of it until Sarah vanished. By mid-afternoon, the first search teams assembled. Local officers, volunteers from neighboring towns, and K-9 units gathered in the Jones driveway as Detective Williams unfurled a map of Springfield across the hood of his cruiser. The city was divided into grid sectors, each assigned to a team. Instructions were explicit: check every shed, every garage, every abandoned building. Look for any sign of a small girl in a yellow dress or anyone who might be concealing her. The first critical discovery came at 4:15 p.m. A search dog reacted strongly to a scent near Bunn Park, half a mile from the Jones home. There, partially hidden in tall grass, officers found one small red sandal, unmistakably Sarah's. The area was immediately sealed off. Crime scene technicians photographed the sandal's position, collected soil samples, and combed the surrounding area for additional evidence. Nothing else was found, not the other sandal, not the yellow dress, not Sarah. That evening, as darkness fell over Springfield, portable floodlights illuminated Bunn Park. The harsh white glare revealed dozens of officers on their hands and knees, methodically searching every inch of ground. Overhead, a police helicopter swept searchlights across dense wooded areas. At the edge of the park, Eleanor and Robert Jones sat in a patrol car, her head on his shoulder, both staring silently into the night that had swallowed their child. By morning, news of Sarah's disappearance had spread throughout Illinois. The Chicago Tribune ran a front-page story with the headline, "4-year-old vanishes from front yard," alongside Sarah's photograph. Radio stations interrupted programming with descriptions of the missing girl. Local businesses printed thousands of flyers bearing her smiling face. That same morning, Detective Williams received a troubling report. William Turner, 37, a clerk at Wilson's Hardware who had done odd jobs around the Jones home and sometimes brought Sarah candy, had abruptly quit his job the previous evening and checked out of his rented room on Maple Street. His landlady reported he had seemed agitated, hastily packed a single suitcase, and mentioned heading west. Most concerning, Turner drove a blue 1958 Chevrolet with Indiana license plates. Williams immediately issued an all-points bulletin for Turner and his vehicle. Background checks revealed Turner had no criminal record but had moved frequently throughout the Midwest, never staying in one town longer than 2 years. Former employers described him as quiet, efficient, and somewhat withdrawn, a loner who seemed uncomfortable around adults but had a gentle way with children. On the third day, as hope began to fade, authorities made the difficult decision to drain a small pond in Bunn Park. The water level dropped slowly, revealing nothing but mud and debris. No evidence, no clues, no Sarah. The second sandal was never found. By the end of the first week, the search radius had expanded to cover all of Sangamon County. Roadblocks were established on major highways. Train stations and bus terminals displayed Sarah's photograph. FBI agents arrived from the Chicago field office, bringing additional resources and expertise in child abduction cases. Every lead was pursued, every tip investigated, but the trail grew colder with each passing day. Meanwhile, William Turner had vanished as completely as Sarah herself. His Chevrolet was spotted at a gas station in Missouri 2 days after the disappearance, but by the time local police responded, he was gone. The attendant remembered him only because he had a child's doll on the passenger seat, not a teddy bear, but a cloth doll with yellow yarn for hair. As July turned to August, the massive search operation gradually contracted. The FBI agents returned to Chicago. The volunteer teams dwindled. The media coverage shifted to newer tragedies. But Springfield remained gripped by fear. Children were no longer allowed to play unsupervised. Front doors were locked, even in daylight. Parents escorted their children to school in groups. A town that had once prided itself on its safety and community spirit was now defined by a single, terrible absence. Robert Jones returned to work, moving through his days like a ghost. Eleanor kept Sarah's room exactly as she had left it, the bed neatly made, dolls arranged on the shelf, small shoes lined up in the closet. Every night, she sat on the edge of the bed, holding Charlie the bear, waiting for a daughter who never came home. In September, an anonymous letter arrived at the Springfield Police Department. Written in block letters on plain white paper, it contained just one sentence. "She's safe with a better family now." No signature, no return address, no identifiable evidence beyond the postmark from St. Louis. Handwriting analysts examined it but found nothing distinctive enough to identify the author. Was it from the kidnapper? A cruel hoax? A misguided attempt at comfort from a stranger? The letter was filed as evidence, another dead end in a case rapidly filling with them. By the one-year anniversary of Sarah's disappearance, the active investigation had effectively ceased. The case remained open, but no new leads emerged. The Jones family held a small memorial service, not a funeral, Eleanor insisted, because there was no body, no proof Sarah was dead. Instead, they planted a maple tree in their backyard, a living reminder of the daughter they refused to believe was gone forever. In the years that followed, the Jones case became part of Illinois criminal history, a cautionary tale, a training example for police cadets, a persistent wound in Springfield's collective memory. Every few years, when another child went missing somewhere in America, the local papers would run retrospective pieces on Sarah, comparing the investigations, wondering if modern techniques might have made a difference. William Turner was never found. His name remained on FBI wanted lists, but as decades passed, the likelihood of apprehending him diminished to almost nothing. Some officers speculated he had changed his identity, perhaps fled to Canada or Mexico. Others believed he may have died, taking the truth about Sarah with him to an unmarked grave. Eleanor Jones never removed Sarah's photograph from the mantel. Every birthday, she baked a small cake. Every Christmas, she hung Sarah's stocking. Robert died of heart failure in 1988, never knowing what happened to his sunshine. Eleanor lived on alone in the beige house with green shutters, tending her garden and volunteering at the church, a quiet woman carrying an unimaginable burden of grief and unanswered questions. And so the case remained, unsolved, unresolved, unforgotten, for more than 5 decades. In January 2015, Detective Amy Lawson, newly assigned to the Springfield Police Department's Cold Case Unit, selected the Sarah Jones disappearance as her first review. Something about the child's photograph, those bright blue eyes, that innocent smile, spoke to her across the span of 53 years. The original case files filled 3 cardboard boxes, their contents yellowed with age, fragile with handling, heavy with disappointment. Lawson approached the case with fresh eyes and modern training. She digitized every document, created timeline software to track movements and alibis, and re-interviewed the few surviving witnesses. Mrs. Miller, now in her 90s and living in a nursing home, still remembered the blue sedan with perfect clarity. It slowed down right in front of the Jones house, she told Lawson, her voice quavering but certain. The driver looked out, then drove on. Not 5 minutes later, that poor child was gone. During her review, Lawson discovered a notation in Detective Williams' personal case notes, evidence box number 4 transferred to county storage, August 1963. Yet the case materials contained only 3 boxes. What happened to box number 4? After weeks of bureaucratic wrangling, Lawson gained access to the county's deep storage facility, a converted Cold War bunker beneath the courthouse where hundreds of evidence containers sat on metal shelves, some untouched for decades. In a far corner, under layers of dust, sat a box labeled Jones, S. Supplemental Materials, 1962. Inside were items considered peripheral to the main investigation. Sarah's school records, family photographs, letters from psychics offering to help find her, and several rolls of undeveloped film. The film rolls were in sealed canisters marked Scene Periphery, photographs taken of the surrounding area on the day of the disappearance, deemed non-essential because they showed neither evidence nor suspects. Lawson sent the film to the FBI's Digital Evidence Laboratory in Quantico. Using advanced restoration techniques, technicians carefully developed the 53-year-old film. Most images showed exactly what the original labels described: neighboring houses, curious onlookers, parked cars on adjacent streets. But one frame, taken from the Jones driveway looking toward the intersection, captured something remarkable: the rear of a blue sedan turning the corner, its license plate partially visible. Through digital enhancement, the FBI was able to recover 3 characters from the plate, 7JW. The vehicle was confirmed as a 1958 Chevrolet, consistent with William Turner's car. The photo was taken at approximately 10:50 a.m. on July 17, 1962, precisely when Sarah disappeared. Lawson requested a search of all 1962 vehicle registrations in Illinois, Indiana, and Missouri with those 3 characters. The antiquated records took months to locate and cross-reference, but finally yielded 5 possible matches. 4 were quickly eliminated: owners who had died, cars that had been scrapped, individuals with verifiable alibis. The 5th belonged to William Turner, Indiana plate 7JW, 493. Simultaneously, Lawson discovered another overlooked item in box number 4, a small plastic evidence bag containing strands of blonde hair from Sarah's hairbrush. The original investigators had preserved it in case a body was found and identification needed confirmation. Lawson sent the sample to a genetic laboratory specializing in degraded DNA recovery. Against all odds, the technicians extracted a viable DNA profile, Sarah Jones's genetic fingerprint, preserved for over 5 decades. With these 2 breakthroughs, the enhanced photograph and the DNA profile, Lawson believed she had enough to reactivate the case formally. The Springfield Police Department held a press conference announcing the new developments. Local and national media covered the story extensively. Sarah's photograph appeared on television screens and newspaper front pages once again, this time alongside an age progression image showing how she might look at 57. The renewed publicity generated dozens of tips, most leading nowhere. But one call, from a retired librarian in Portland, Oregon, caught Lawson's attention. The woman had recognized the age progression image. It resembled her friend Susan Bennett, a kindergarten teacher who had often mentioned being adopted in the early 1960s. More intriguingly, Susan had always celebrated her birthday on July 16, one day before Sarah's disappearance. Lawson flew to Portland to interview Susan Bennett, approaching the meeting with cautious optimism. Susan was a slender woman with graying blonde hair and striking blue eyes, eyes that matched the photographs of Robert and Eleanor Jones. She agreed to discuss her adoption, explaining that she had few concrete details. Her adoptive parents, now deceased, had told her she was born in Chicago to a mother who couldn't care for her. They had adopted her through a private arrangement in late 1962, facilitated by a man they knew only as Mr. Williams, who claimed to be representing the birth mother. Susan had no birth certificate, only adoption papers finalized in California in December 1962, 5 months after Sarah's disappearance. The papers listed her birth date as July 16, 1958, making her officially 4 years old at adoption, exactly Sarah's age. With Susan's consent, Lawson collected a DNA sample, a simple cheek swab that traveled back to Illinois in a sealed evidence bag. The comparison was completed within weeks. The results left no room for doubt. Susan Bennett and Sarah Jones shared 100% of their DNA markers. Susan Bennett was Sarah Jones. The revelation stunned both women. Susan sat in shocked silence when Lawson called with the results, then asked in a whisper, "Are you telling me my entire life has been a lie?" The detective had no easy answer, only the truth. Susan had been kidnapped as a child, her identity erased, her history rewritten by the man who took her, William Turner. Further investigation revealed that Turner had fled to California after the abduction, changing his name to William Williams. He had presented himself to the Bennett family as a social worker handling private adoptions. The Bennetts, unable to have children and desperate to adopt, had accepted his story without question and paid him $5,000, a substantial sum in 1962, for arranging the adoption. They had raised Susan with love and care, never suspecting the traumatic truth of her origins. Turner himself had disappeared again after the adoption, likely assuming yet another identity. Records suggested he may have continued arranging illegal adoptions throughout the 1960s, exploiting the lack of centralized records and background checks. He was presumed dead by the time of Susan's identification. No trace of him had been found after 1975. The most difficult task fell to Detective Lawson, informing Eleanor Jones that her daughter had been found alive after 54 years. Eleanor, now 83 and residing in a Springfield nursing home, had never left the city, never remarried, never stopped hoping. When Lawson entered her room, Eleanor was sitting by the window, a framed photograph of Sarah on the table beside her. "Mrs. Jones," Lawson said gently, "we've found Sarah." Eleanor's hands trembled as she grasped the detective's meaning. "My Sarah? My little girl is alive?" The words came in a broken whisper, half a century of grief unraveling in a single moment. The reunion took place 2 weeks later in a private room at the Springfield Police Department. Eleanor arrived in a wheelchair, her thin frame draped in her best dress, her white hair neatly styled. Susan, still struggling to reconcile her identity as Sarah, entered hesitantly, carrying a small photo album of her life. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the mother who had never stopped waiting, the daughter who never knew she was lost. Then Eleanor extended a trembling hand and touched Susan's cheek. "I would have known you anywhere," she whispered. "You have your father's eyes." Susan knelt beside the wheelchair and took Eleanor's hands in hers. "I don't remember," she said softly. "I wish I did, but I don't remember you or this place or that day. But I want to know. I want to understand who I was, who I am." That afternoon, they began the painful, beautiful process of reconstruction, showing photographs, sharing stories, piecing together the fragments of a shattered family. Susan learned about her father, about Charlie the bear, about the maple tree planted in her memory. Eleanor learned about Susan's life in Oregon, her career as a teacher, her own children, grandchildren Eleanor had never known existed. In the weeks that followed, DNA testing confirmed paternal lineage as well. Susan was indeed the biological child of Robert and Eleanor Jones, kidnapped on July 17, 1962, and raised as Susan Bennett in California and later Oregon. The case was officially reclassified, no longer a missing person investigation but a resolved kidnapping. The statute of limitations had long expired, and William Turner was beyond the reach of justice, but the truth had finally emerged from decades of darkness. The Sarah Jones case transformed cold case investigation protocols across Illinois. The state legislature passed the Sarah Jones Evidence Preservation Act, requiring indefinite storage of biological materials in missing persons cases. The Springfield Police Department established enhanced training for evidence collection and digital archiving. Detective Lawson was promoted to head the expanded cold case unit, where she implemented what became known as Sarah's Protocol, the systematic review of dormant cases using advanced technological resources. For Susan Bennett, the revelation of her true identity precipitated a profound personal journey. She took a leave of absence from teaching and moved temporarily to Springfield, renting an apartment near Eleanor's nursing home. Daily visits became a routine, Susan bringing coffee and pastries, Eleanor sharing family photographs and stories. Together they visited Robert's grave, where Susan placed flowers for the father she never knew. The media clamored for interviews, documentary filmmakers requested access, book publishers offered contracts. Susan declined them all, guarding her privacy and Eleanor's dignity. "This is not a spectacle," she told Detective Lawson. "This is my life, our lives, being reconstructed after unimaginable trauma. We deserve to do that in peace." In private conversations with Lawson, Susan struggled to make sense of William Turner's actions. Did he hate my parents? Was he mentally ill? Was it about money? The detective had no satisfying answers. The investigation suggested Turner had become fixated on Sarah after doing repair work at the Jones home. He had mentioned to co-workers that he thought Sarah was not being raised right, a bizarre delusion given the Jones' devoted parenting. Whether he kidnapped her for profit, out of some twisted savior complex, or due to mental illness remained unknowable. What was clear was the devastating ripple effect of his actions, Robert Jones dying without knowing his daughter was alive. Eleanor spending decades in suspended grief, Susan growing up disconnected from her true identity and origins. One man's decision had altered the trajectories of countless lives, creating wounds that even the truth could not fully heal. Yet amid the pain came moments of grace. When Susan brought her children, Eleanor's grandchildren, to Springfield for Christmas, they gathered in Eleanor's room at the nursing home. The eldest grandson, noticing the photograph on Eleanor's nightstand, remarked how much his mother resembled the little girl in the yellow dress. Eleanor smiled through tears and said, "That's because that little girl is your mother." By 2016, the Sarah Jones case had become a template for cold case resolution. 3 more long-dormant missing persons cases in Illinois were solved using similar methods: digital enhancement of archived photographs, DNA extraction from preserved evidence, genetic genealogy. Each success reinforced the lesson of Sarah's case, that no evidence is too old, no case truly cold if the right technology and perseverance are applied. In June 2016, exactly 54 years after Sarah's disappearance, the Illinois Department of Justice formally closed the case file. The official closing document stated, Sarah Elizabeth Jones, reported missing July 17, 1962, has been located alive and reunited with her biological family. Case status, resolved. That same month, Susan, legally reclaiming her birth name while retaining Bennett as her middle name, established the Sarah Bennett Jones Foundation, dedicated to supporting cold case investigations and providing resources for families of missing children. The Foundation's first initiative funded advanced DNA testing for 20 unsolved disappearances dating back to the 1950s and 60s. At the Foundation's inaugural event, Susan stood at the podium and surveyed the audience: law enforcement officers, families of missing persons, media representatives. Behind her hung a large photograph, herself at 4 in the yellow dress alongside her recent picture with Eleanor. "Time doesn't erase who we truly are," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. "For 54 years, I lived as Susan Bennett, unaware of the trauma that created that identity. I had a good life, loving adoptive parents, and a fulfilling career. But there was always something missing, a connection I couldn't name, a history I couldn't access. She paused, glancing at Eleanor in the front row. I now know I am also Sarah Jones, daughter of Robert and Eleanor, born in Springfield, loved and mourned and searched for decades after I was taken. That truth doesn't negate who I became, but it completes the picture of who I am. My story is unusual because it has a resolution. Most families of missing children never get answers. They exist in perpetual limbo, unable to grieve properly, unable to move forward completely. Today, we commit to changing that reality, to leveraging every technological advance, every resource, every moment of determination to find answers for families still waiting. Eleanor, frail but radiant, joined her daughter at the podium. Together, they unveiled the Foundation's motto, inscribed on a simple plaque: "No one is truly lost if someone still searches." The Sarah Jones case changed how America views cold cases, not as dusty files but as unfinished human stories awaiting resolution. It demonstrated that justice has no expiration date, that technology can bridge gaps left by time, and that perseverance sometimes yields miracles. For the city of Springfield, the case's resolution brought healing to a wound that had defined it for generations. The maple tree planted in Sarah's memory still stands in what is now a public garden, surrounded by benches where Eleanor and Susan often sit together, making up for lost conversations across 5 lost decades. Detective Lawson continues her work, applying the lessons of the Jones case to other investigations. The enhanced photograph that revealed the partial license plate hangs framed in her office, a reminder that sometimes the most critical evidence is hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes, the right technology, and the right moment to reveal its truth. As for Susan, as for Sarah, she carries forward both her identities, both her histories. She has returned to teaching in Oregon, but visits Springfield regularly. She wears a locket containing 2 photographs. Herself as a child in a yellow dress, and her adoptive parents who raised her with love, though their family was built on deception. In her classroom, she keeps a teddy bear on her desk, not the original Charlie, lost forever on that summer morning in 1962, but a similar one that Eleanor gave her after their reunion. When students ask about it, she says simply, "He reminds me that even when something seems lost forever, hope is never wasted." The Sarah Jones case is more than a solved mystery, it is a testament to the endurance of family bonds, the evolution of justice, and the human capacity for healing even after unimaginable separation. It reminds us that beneath the sensational headlines and cold statistics of missing persons cases lie real human lives, lives interrupted, diverted, but sometimes, against all odds, restored. If this story has moved you, please subscribe to our channel for more journeys through America's most remarkable cold cases. Every view, every share helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. Because as Sarah Jones herself discovered, the truth may be delayed, but with persistence and courage, it cannot be denied. #Solved, Illinois Cold Case Sarah Jones, for missing girl found alive after 54 years, 1962 to 2016. Puzzle piece: a 4-year-old girl vanished from her front yard in Springfield, Illinois on a summer morning in 1962, leaving behind only a teddy bear and scattered toys. Authorities suspected William Turner, a family friend who worked at the local hardware store and abruptly left town after Sarah disappeared. For over 5 decades, her mother Eleanor refused to give up hope, keeping her daughter's room untouched and celebrating her birthday every year. Then in 2015, a determined young detective discovered a forgotten box of evidence containing undeveloped film from the crime scene. The enhanced photographs revealed a partial license plate that would crack open a 54-year-old mystery and lead to an emotional reunion between a kindergarten teacher in Oregon and the mother who had waited a lifetime to find her stolen daughter. If this case moved you, thumbs up, like this video to support the families still waiting for answers. Speech balloon, comment your thoughts. How would you react if you discovered your entire identity was built on a lie? Television, subscribe to join our community uncovering America's most remarkable cold case resolutions. Warning, disclaimer: this video contains sensitive content about child abduction. Some details have been modified to protect privacy. This presentation is for educational purposes only. Warning. Direct hit tags. Sarah Jones found, Illinois cold case solved, 1960s kidnapping, cold case breakthrough, DNA reunites family, missing child found alive, Springfield, Illinois crime, decades-long mystery, true crime documentary, missing girl found, cold case files, Detective Amy Lawson, William Turner kidnapping, forgotten evidence, illegal adoption case, true identity discovery, 54 years missing, photo evidence breakthrough, 1962 abduction, mother-daughter reunion. Bookmark hashtags. Hashtag cold cases, hashtag missing persons, hashtag true crime family, hashtag vanished, hashtag Sarah Jones case, hashtag Illinois cold case, hashtag 1960s crime, hashtag DNA solved, hashtag missing child found, hashtag cold case files, hashtag true crime, hashtag Springfield mystery, hashtag forgotten evidence, hashtag identity discovery, hashtag cold case breakthrough, hashtag detective work, hashtag family reunion. Hashtag justice served, hashtag never give up, hashtag true crime community, hashtag evidence preservation, hashtag cold case unit.